I'm tired of polished Western tales. But this $100 ghost town let out a thin wisp of smoke, and an old woman said, "My house." From then on, rain tapped the chipped cup. Money placed on the counter, the warmth of a gun grip, horses left behind, a roof breathing with a small fire. Stay and hear that faint ting. The road into the ghost town had no name sign. Thornweed rose to a horse's knees, the dry brown tips giving a small hiss when touched, like the pop of damp firewood. An old wheel lay tilted in the ditch, spokes broken, axle grease dried white as salt. I walked slow. The earth's scent rose with old iron, mixed with rot of leaves. Farther on, a row of rotted power poles stood like bones. The wires were cut, leaving a short length wound around a nail, swaying now and then when the wind shifted through the canyon gap. Closer, I saw the corrugated roof of a low house still intact, not straight, but still a roof. From it, kitchen smoke rose in a thin line, straight up like gray thread, pulled from a needle's eye. Not much, just enough to say the fire lived. The chill across my hands met the faint warmth of smoke brushing my face. No one said whose house it was. No one asked. I stepped once more, leather scraping over fine dust, sounding like a knife edge across blotting paper. By the grassed roadside, a sign lay face down. I nudged it with my toe. Mercantile. The paint left in the M was thicker than the rest, where the writer's hand had likely paused. A wind gust shoved the sign a short way along the dirt. Beyond it, wooden steps led to the porch. The third board from the edge had a lengthwise crack. I stepped to the right. The dry hinges let out a long note, joined by metals somewhere in the roof rattling in time. Inside was dimmer than the yard, but not dark. After a moment, my eyes took it in. Dust fell in threads, true threads from the crossbeams above. Dust didn't scatter but descended in thin lines, even as cut silver hair. On the floor they broke, leaving a faint film on the planks. I drew a breath through my nose. Hearth ash mixed with the stale scent of old mice, rotted cloth, and spent lamp oil. Following the counter, my heel caught a pebble, rolling a few beats before it stopped. No voice answered that sound. On the wooden table by the window, a white enamel cup, upside down, chipped at the rim. The chip wasn't round, but shaped like an ankle bone. The glaze pulled away to show the clay beneath, brown leaning. As I came close, fine ash speckled the mouth and part of the body. Not thick, just enough that if someone put a fingertip to it, they'd leave a clean mark the size of a nail. I didn't touch it. I looked at the rim, saw on the outer edge a faint crow's foot crack, running across, then stopping at the chip. The table's belly sagged. Window. The window on the left had no glass. The frame still held, nails in the corners rusted gold. On the sill, a fly lay on its back, legs drawn in. When the wind came, the body spun half a turn, then stopped, as if it carried its own thought. Light slipped through a hole in the roof, pooling in narrow streaks that chased dust in the air before going out. I heard wind passing a bottle's mouth, the light hollow note of something not quite round. Behind the counter, a glass jar with a narrow neck, empty but for a thin jute string. The string was newer than everything else around. It's brown, still warm. Behind the counter, the old woman stood straight, hair cut short, evenly silver, neither curled nor covering her neck. Clothes patched in layers, stitches straight, thread color not matching the fabric. At her cuff, a brown mark, not fresh mud. Her hand rested on the counter's top, right where the wood was polished smooth from years of touch. Fingers thin, joints showing, nails cut close, with an old scratch along the nail edge. Her eyes met mine, then looked past me to the door behind. No push, no pull, only weighing how much space I took, how much sound I made. I nodded, said nothing. She didn't either. The wind shifted, slipped through the roof hole. A dust thread leaned off its course. A small knock somewhere, like a grain hitting an empty tin, then gone. I heard the beat of the silence after, long as one deep breath. I looked around. The shelves right of the counter held 3 rusted pots, an empty ink bottle with black stuck at the neck, 2 torn rolls of canvas missing their straps. In the far corner, a bench scale tilted left, its needle stuck at the 2 mark. The floor sagged to a hollow in front of the stove. Low brick stove, soot black around the mouth, but inside a faint red ring. No one sat near it, yet the fire kept its rhythm. The smoke here was like the smoke outside, but with fat in it. Cornmeal to keep an empty stomach from hurting. On the wall beside the stove hung a length of old leather strap, its end polished by many pulls. Below it, a large nail, head flattened by hammering. The nail sat in the wood, a little off true. The marks around it formed a faint ring from hanging and taking down over and over. "This is my house." She said it like pointing out an object so someone wouldn't trip over it. No lift in the voice, no press, hard, dry, with no quiver at the end. As she spoke, her hand stayed on the counter. Only the thumb, small shoe print. Toes stepped in, then halted at the edge of the light, then turned out. Old, the tread faint. At the print's edge clung a thin fiber of jute, like one used to tie a parcel mouth. I didn't touch it. At the counter's foot, a small wooden box showed, no lock. Its lid wore a thin coat of dust, but the edge of the lid was brighter, as if often opened. I didn't open it. I looked back at the enamel cup, set upside down, like it waited for a familiar hand. The ash on its side curved like a bow, showing someone once flicked the bottom. The flick was old, new ash fallen over it, but the groove still showed. The chipped rim shone more than the intact glaze, maybe from a mouth held there long, maybe from a finger circling it in thought. A dog, somewhere outside, cleared its throat, maybe only a strong breath through the nose at a strange scent. The sound was short, stripped by the wind, leaving only the hollow after it. I heard the doorway's frame shiver, then steady. In the corner, a 3-legged stool, one leg replaced with a greenwood peg, pale compared to the other 2, weathered gray. The peg's head bent slightly, plain marks still rough, a job done lately, not a thing discarded. I took 2 more steps, my boots reaching the square of light's edge. The old woman looked down at my toes, then back to my eyes. That was all. No order to stop, no urge to go on. I lifted my hat from my head, brushed the brim lightly. The dust rose, not much, then settled exactly where it had left, as if it remembered. I set the hat on the table, beside the white enamel cup, didn't touch the cup, left a space the width of 1 finger between them. On the side of the counter hung a thin cloth bag, its mouth tied with jute string. That jute was like the strand in the glass jar. The tie held a double knot, not the kind made by a quick hand. The knot sat tight and neat, the string ends cut short, as if with a sharp blade. She didn't look at the bag. Her hand still lay in its place on the counter. That patch of wood, if one stood here long enough, would take on an even deeper polish. A torn scrap of paper was pressed into the seam of the table. Its corner carried a blot of ink, the letters unreadable. Beside it, a wooden button, 2 holes, with a few black fibers still clinging. Under the stool's leg lay a black thread caught in dust. It was knotted with a thinner jute fiber into a tiny knot. No one bothered to pick it apart. Things like that, if left untouched, would stay there until the next rainy season, then turn into something else in the eyes of whoever came after. Outside, the thin kitchen smoke stretching 3 handspans from the threshold inward before breaking. Its end curled, as if the person carrying the bucket had changed hands midway. I leaned a hip against the counter, keeping enough space so she wouldn't need to shift. On the wall behind her, a large nail was driven at a slant, strong enough to hang something heavy. Now it was bare. Beside it, the round mark of what had once hung there. The mark stood at a man's chest height. Measuring with my eye, I saw it tilt a little to the left, meaning whatever hung there had been taken down more often by a right-handed person than lifted up. "You been here long?" I asked, half a voice, half a breath. No push, no twist. She looked at me, didn't answer. Her gaze hung somewhere between me and the enamel cup. Perhaps it went through both. When I thought the question would die in a long stretch of silence, she lifted her hand from the counter, brushed a loose stitch on her shoulder seam, and tied it off with a single knot. Then her hand returned to its place. "My house," she said again, quieter than before. Needing nothing more, I glanced toward the door. Outside, the dust on the ground had thickened by a layer. A new wind had bent all the grass in one direction. Farther out, the patch of sky between 2 rooftops slowed its falling shadow. That shadow sank onto the porch step like a cloth laid over a table. By the well, the wooden bucket lay tilted. Its rope slipped partway from the handle. The rope's end frayed, its strands split like burned hair. I marked the tie point, the winding's direction, and guessed the last draw had been when the air was still damp, because the hemp fibers still clung to dust. From a beam overhead, a spider let itself down on silk, swaying in the square of light. It stopped mid-air for a long moment, as if weighing, then went back up. As it moved, the silk trembled, brushing falling dust and breaking the threads into specks. Those specks faded into the air without a sound. My stomach gave a low murmur. Outside the door, the dog breathed hard again. Everything fell back into place. I lifted a hand toward the enamel cup, then stopped halfway. My fingers were just close enough to feel the warmth of window light against its side. I drew back. In this ghost town, nothing was mine. At least, not now. From my pocket, I pulled a small scrap of cloth, wiped my boots' tips, brushed my trouser cuffs, not for cleanliness, but to give my hands work. I set the cloth back exactly where it had been, without still hearing it run through the floor to my boots' tips, then fade. Outside, the light changed. On the enamel cup, a narrow stripe slid across its side and stopped at the chip, like an unseen hand scoring a mark with a thin blade. I understood that in a place thought empty, someone still kept fire, tied rope, knotted thread, set stools, drove nails, and turned cups, and that "this is my house" was not to be argued. It was a fact, standing and breathing in the middle of the room, where the light square lay, where dust still fell in threads, steady and durable as habit. I asked nothing more. I stood there until my eyes fully took the house's shadow, and my hand no longer wanted to touch the cup. Then I lifted my hat, set it on, nodded, stepped back 1 pace, avoiding the cracked board. The door sounded the same long note as when I came in, like a sentence repeated word for word. On the porch, the smoke rose thin. No one said whose house it was. But if anyone asked, I would point at the half-open door and say nothing. In this country, sometimes silence is the only way to speak true. Boone took a paper from the inside of his coat. An old fold had stiffened the edge, the bottom worn like a dulled, broken blade. He set it on the counter, exactly on the wood worn smooth by hands. In the top left corner a faded blue stamp, its letters broken along the grain. At the signature line the paper sank slightly, as if the pen had pressed too hard at the last stroke. Boone ran his thumb along the fold, sending a short trail of fine dust into the air before it fell back as grains. The old woman didn't look. Her hand stayed in place. Knuckles ridged, nails cut short, a stubborn old brown mark on the nail's edge. She turned her head a little, ear leaning toward the inner room. A cough came out, dry, flat, as if someone dragged a board across a mesh. Then stillness. Still long enough to hear a faint crack in the stove. "You have paper," she said, eyes still not dropping. Then paused. "I have someone sick." Boone kept his hand on the paper, didn't draw it back. His wrist eased, blue veins showing faint under sun-browned skin. His mouth closed, the corner holding an old split. He looked toward the dark behind the coarse cloth curtain. The curtain was from an old cornmeal sack, its print backward, the lower edge sewn in haste with black thread. The knot pulled tight, the ends cut blunt. I walked around the counter's edge, stopped where the porch light reached. The smell of fever sweat. Face carried the pale green of someone unfed for days and never sleeping whole nights. Lips dry, split in the center. Each time he swallowed, his throat moved weakly, like a small blade inside its sheath. The water bucket sat under the table, half full. The surface was flat, freckled with a few black specks. I tapped the bucket's rim with a finger. The rings went out, then came back, pulling the residue into a tight circle in the center. When the ripples died, the clump opened into a star shape, then sank slow. A wooden ladle hung from a hook nearby. Its handle was cracked, bound with jute. The knot was neat, tied by a hand used to holding, used to binding. Boone stood in the doorway to the back room, not stepping in. His hand left the paper, set it flat on the counter's edge, as if careful not to leave a mark. He turned to look at me. No signal, no question. I nodded slightly. Inside, the boy shifted, drew his heels closer to his belly. Another cough came, dry, deeper. His small hand shot from under the blanket, gripping the wood. Sand in the fingertips, nails bitten short. Each cough made his chest rise once, then collapse like hide drying in wind. "Medicine?" I asked, but it was to the room. No answer. The old woman moved half a step, not to clear a path, not to block one, only to stand closer to the curtain. She turned to take a cloth from a nail, dipped it in the bucket, wrung it out. Water fell to the floor in 3 drops, evenly spaced. She laid the cloth on the boy's neck, held it still. The cloth was dark gray, its edge stitched in a different color. Those stitches were hers, even, straight, quiet. All the while the paper still lay bare on the counter. The faded blue seal looked like a dried pond. A thin layer of dust had begun settling again on the signature. A fly came in through the window, landed on the corner, rubbed its legs. I brushed at it lightly. It flew off, circled once, and settled on the bucket's handle.
From the yard came the sound of metal on rope, then hoofbeats on gravel. 3 different rhythms, but even, unhurried. Somewhere the dog changed its breathing to a short growl. The old woman lifted her head a little, hand still on the child's neck. Boone looked toward the front door. His eyes narrowed, the crow's feet deepened. He didn't reach for his gun belt. He only straightened his back. The hoofbeats stopped at the porch. Shadows crossed the doorway. Dust followed their boots in, carrying the smell of horse sweat and gun oil. 3 men came inside, no uniforms. But their gun belts matched, the brass dull gold. Their guns stayed in the holsters.
The middle one said, neither loud nor rough, as if stating a daily thing. The old woman didn't answer. The hand on the cloth didn't move. Only her wrist tightened, sinews showing. Boone didn't shift. His breath drew a little longer, visible in the rise and fall of his shirt. I stood at an angle behind him, enough to see the right-hand man's finger resting near the gun's grip, not fully on it. The middle man took 2 steps forward. His belt brushed the counter's edge, ringing a faint metallic note. His eyes stopped on the dark behind the curtain. His head tilted, as if used to hearing coughs like that. A pale scar crossed his chin, running diagonal from left to right. Only after a moment did he look at the paper on the counter. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your paper won't hold your people for you," he said. Not to Boone, not exactly to anyone. Only to let the sound stay in the room. The old woman turned halfway. Her shirt hung loose, the patch on her shoulder catching a dim light through the roof gap. She didn't look into the faces of any of the 3. Her eyes passed over the big nail in the wall, stopped for a blink, then moved on. "He's sick," her voice rasped, not pleading, not defying. The right-hand man moved a step. His boot's spur scraped the board, making a short squeal. He reached into his coat, pulled out a gray cloth pouch. Its drawstring was thin leather, the knot a tradesman's. The pouch weighed enough to make his wrist dip as he offered it. He didn't open it, just held it out. His hand smelled faintly of machine oil, clinging around the nails. "Sell him," he said. "Enough to buy this piece back." The words dropped in the middle of the room like a heavy object into shallow water. No splash, just a dull gulp. Then quiet. The fly left the bucket handle, landed on the upside-down enamel cup in the front room, somehow, in my head, making a short line between the 2 rooms. Boone still looked at the pouch. His eyes lowered, then rose. His jaw tightened, but his hand stayed open on the counter, fingers straight, nail pressing into the grain to hold steady. His shirt's shoulder wrinkled with each breath. A vein in his neck slanted a little. He didn't speak. The paper stayed there, the word "deed" showing backward in the light caught on the dust, like an inscription fading on a headstone. I heard the water in the bucket stir faintly. No one touched it. Maybe the floor quivered with footsteps. The residue floated into 2 thin streaks. The cloth on the child's neck darkened with a new spot. He swallowed hard. His eyes opened a slit, then shut again. His small hand slid from the blanket's edge, dropped. "Quick," he said. "Rain's coming, roads will be trouble." He glanced toward the door, where gray clouds slid up from the low hills. A light ozone smell came ahead of the rain. I thought of the roof's gap above the beam, of water spilling through the bent gutter in a few hours. I thought of the enamel cup on the table out front, of how a thing changes direction when someone turns it over. Boone didn't touch the pouch. He didn't pull the paper back. His hand shifted, setting down on the counter where the old woman's always rested. He touched the polished wood, a short touch, then drew back. Small movement, but close enough to hear the faint rasp of skin on grain. The old woman saw it. Her face didn't change, but her shoulders eased by a fraction, like when someone carrying a heavy bucket feels another hand take part of the weight, not to claim it, just to steady. The left-hand man tapped his fingernail on his gun belt. A steady beat. He looked around the store, not to price anything, but to measure exits, the space to the stove, the things that might catch a foot. He knew how to drag someone out with rope. That kind of work had its own count. I saw a round bruise on his wrist, rope burn, fresh. No law for keeping people here, the middleman said. We take what we fed, what we paid to fix. You want peace? Sell. Done. He pushed the pouch again so it pressed into the paper. The paper shifted. The faded seal twitched with it, like an eye turned by another's hand. The old woman let the cloth slide from the boy's neck. Not exactly let go. She set it firm on his chest, to keep the breath in. She stepped out half a pace, standing closer to the counter's edge. Her bare feet touched the floor, where the wood was cold, the veins on their backs raised. Her thumb rested atop her forefinger, a small movement, as if holding herself back from haste. No, she said. One word, flat tone. After it, a space. In that space, rain began tapping on the tin roof over the porch. 2, 3 first drops. The tack spaced evenly, then a little heavier. The man on the right tilted his head. Sick all the more reason to go. Here it's only death, he said. Not cruel, just as one says, this road is steep. He lifted the pouch to Boone's eye level, waiting for a hand to take it and end the standoff. I looked at the strap. Leather worn thin in one spot from hanging long, with a fine crack running. The season's first rain would soften it. The knot might slip if pulled hard. Boone glanced through the curtain again. The boy's eyes had opened a slit, pupils moving unevenly, as if searching for something known. Not finding it. The lids lowered, breath stretched out, then caught midway. Belly rose faintly, chin trembled once. The old woman set her hand on his chest, the old hand holding a new rhythm, trying
For salt, for nails, enough to buy this piece back. In me another hollow opened. There the rain's patter on the bent gutter formed an even line, drawn out. I saw the enamel cup in the front room, ash-covered. Saw it waiting for the moment someone turned it. Saw that dirty or clean water mattered less than which hand held the cup, and who it was handed to first. But for now, no one turned it. The pouch was still out front, the paper still beneath. The sick still coughing like that. The rain was thickening. Boone lifted his hand from the counter, not to take the pouch. He slowly drew the paper toward him, just enough, not clear of the edge. Paper brushed wood, soft. Outside, the fly beat its wings once. The middleman's brow drew in a notch. No one said more. The room held its pressed breath. Only the water on the roof began finding its way to the bent gutter, tapping steady, announcing something coming, by persistence alone, without anyone's leave. Wind drove through the roof, the smell of rust spilling in like faint blood. From a beam, a drop worked past a nail, fell onto the counter, bursting with a small tick, spreading a dark patch. Boone leaned against the door frame. His shoulder touched wood worn bright from hands resting there. His right hand slid down to the gun belt, stopped at the frayed strap. Didn't draw. Only rested there, as one rests a hand on a horse's rein until it stops shivering. In the back, the boy coughed. A long cough, bending him like wet cane. The cloth on his neck slipped. The sound passed through the coarse curtain, through cup rims, caught on the stove's edge, rebounded to the porch, then died. Each cough left a fresh hollow in the room. Outside, the rain grew heavier. The gutter clinked steady, lock, like someone counting nails. The three men stayed still. Rain ran off the brims of their hats, dropped down their collars. The middle one tilted his head, squinted at Boone through the rain. Breaths on both sides rose and fell almost in time. The pouch in the right-hand man's grip stayed out. The knot now wet, darkening. The leather beginning to soften, threads fraying at the edge. Boone didn't speak. His eyes slid past the pouch, touched the paper's exposed edge on the counter, then fixed on the curtain. The hand on his gun belt eased open, each finger finding its fit on each old wear mark. I stood at an angle behind him, hearing the water in the gutter strike harder. One large drop jumped from the bent lip, broke into 3 on the porch floor. On the table in the front, the upside-down enamel cup suddenly caught a thin flash along the chip, as if someone scored the glaze with a blade. "Don't," I thought, without voice. Hung, lifted her hand, turned the enamel cup upright, its mouth open to the rain. The first water was dirty, the flow carrying roof dust, bits of moss, rust. She tilted the cup, spilled that away. The second run was clearer. She held it still. The sound of rain in the cup was not the sound of rain on the roof. It was tighter, heavier. Cock, cock. Then filling. She lifted the cup, her right hand over the chip so the edge wouldn't cut skin, her left under the base. Her thumb pinched lightly for balance. Water spilled over the rim in a thin thread, ran down the side, drew a bright line down her wrist, then fell to the porch, spreading a dark stain. She turned in, walked straight, still without speaking. Boone stayed at the doorway. His hand left the gun belt, swung the door open a touch wider, enough for her to pass. The middleman edged a half step, then stopped. No one reached to block. They watched the cup as if it were a stray bird flying home. The right-hand man's face creased as rain hit his eyelid. He blinked fast, up, down, as if drying out a thought snagged inside. In the back, she bent. The enamel cup touched the cloth before it touched the boy's mouth. The sound of glaze against teeth, a very small sound. The boy's small hand felt for the cup, slid to the chip. He flinched, then closed on it. She tilted the cup. One swallow. His chest lifted slightly. Water passed his dry throat with the grit of water poured through a long, idle bamboo tube. He coughed and sputtered. She didn't take the cup away, brought it closer, her thumb blocking part of the rim so the stream narrowed, went in small pulses. The boy swallowed slow, eyes half open, pupils trembling like a cricket caught on a thin string. That moment broke like a raindrop on the gutter's edge. None of the 3 men spoke. Boone didn't move. I didn't breathe. Other sounds fell away. Only the swallowing remained. Cock, cock. Each sound like setting another stone on the nearer side of the scale. The brick stove clicked faintly, a splinter dropping its ash. Thin smoke curled into the light patch, its scent meeting the rains, changing into the warm, damp smell of cloth not fully dried. The boy drank it all. She tipped the cup, dropped the last bead onto the cloth, wiped his mouth. Now the enamel was drenched. The chip shone with a cold line. She set the cup on the small table by the bed, mouth up, its base speckled with foam. Her hand left the cup, settled on the boy's forehead, staying a little longer than usual. Her wrist trembled slightly, not from fear, but from strength pulled in many directions. Only then did Boone breathe out. He turned, "Draw." He followed the cup for a beat, his gaze falling short, like someone missing a step on the stairs. "Done yet?" His voice was dry, not a question, just dropping a scrap of sound to test whether the room still heard him or had turned to the rain. Boone didn't answer. His hand was still on the doorframe. Old knuckles, filmed with rain grit, paled slightly. The pouch in the right-hand man's grip was soaked. A thin bead leaked through the fray, slid down his finger. He shook it off. That small movement loosened the knot by half a thumb's width. He saw it, clamped his mouth, tried to pull it tight again, but the leather was slick. The knot no longer bit. A coin the size of a fingernail rolled out through the gap, hit the floor with a thin ting. No one bent to pick it up. The left-hand man looked toward the horses. 3, drenched, pressed to the fence, tails swishing at flies. One stamped both hind feet, white foam showing at the bit with each breath. The tie rope was cinched to the post in a locking knot. Rain swelled the hemp. The knot was tighter for it. He stepped onto the porch, tried to work it loose. The rope was waterlogged, fibers giving. He stopped, let it go, looked back into the porch. Inside, the boy had sagged into sleep, breathing lighter, not yet steady. The old woman pulled the cloth higher on his chest, folded the edge to close the gap. She didn't glance at the men, didn't glance at the money, didn't glance at the rain. She took the enamel cup, holding it by the chip, went to the porch again. No one stopped her. She caught the water again. This time it was clearer, the thin stream straight, drumming softly into the cup in steadier beats. She came back, set the cup near the stove, not on its mouth, but close enough for the heat to lift the water to just warm. She tested the rim with the back of her hand, gauging. Then set it beside the bed. I caught the scent of heated metal meeting new rain, clean in the way this place meant clean, clean because it would serve. Boone didn't move. Rain blown from the porch clung to his back. The middleman sighed. It sounded like someone blowing on a cigarette's ash. He turned to the yard. The rain was heavy now. Mud ran in the alley between the 2 rows of buildings, drawing off dry leaves and stove ash, winding away like a black rope. Go, short. No other signal. The left-hand man pulled his hat lower, waded through the yard, along the fence. The right-hand man dropped the pouch on the counter. It landed with a muffled thunk, heavy. He didn't look at it again. He followed out. The middleman paused with water. The middleman walked. His figure shrank into the white curtain. Boots sucked in the mud, then went quiet. None turned back for the horses. In the store, the stove glowed red. Boone fed it a split log. He didn't look at me, didn't look at the pouch. He pushed the coals with a short steel rod. The fire shifting to one side, redder, low but steady. On the wall, his shadow stretched, then drew back with each in and out of the rod. The old woman sat on the 3-legged stool. It wobbled. She leveled it with a wood shim under her foot. Her silver hair hung in wet strands down her neck. She didn't wipe it. The pouch lay on the counter. Rain seeped from its edge, running in a line to the counter's rim, dripping to the floor in time with the porch rain. No one opened it. I heard the coins shift inside, just barely, each time a drop landed and the pouch shivered. That rhythm became a background, joining the fire's chew on wood, the gutter's pour, the boy's quiet breath. Night came slow, not because the sun lingered, but because the house's small tasks slowed the hour. She drew up the blanket. Boone split a stick with his old knife, the blade flashing once before dying in his hand. I slid the door bar in place. The dog in the yard stopped growling, curled under the porch, nose against the fence post, where the 3 ropes still tied. Rain ran down his muzzle.
he sneezed once. In the stove, the coals shifted color, from orange to deep red to black under white ash. Boone didn't add wood yet. He waited for the flame to find a new path in the coal bed. The stove kept an even heat. The glow lifted and fell with the wind seeping through the door crack. The enamel cup sat near the stove, mouth up. Steam rose from it in a thin column, breaking a hand-span high. The chipped rim was dry now, lit in a fine edge. The old woman sat, her eyes neither shut nor wide, on the curtain where the boy slept. Each time he turned, she shifted her fingertip on her knee, as if keeping an invisible cord from slipping. I heard the porch drops thinning, the rain smell fading. In its place, the scent of dry wood, of damp clothes cooling, of new ash. The store's stove stayed red till late, red enough that anyone passing the trail outside would. Their horses as if leaving a sentence unfinished. Here's sometimes an act is enough for an answer. And the night was long, but not as cold, because the stove kept its pace.
Fire tells no story. It only works into the wood, patient.
Like the way people here choose one thing and see it through. Day came in a thin band sliding over the rafters, settling on the counter. No one gave a morning greeting. Only the sound of ash collapsing in the stove, and the rope outside touching the post in a short tap. The wind was edging dry. The night's smell lifted from the floorboards. Boone stepped to the porch, carrying hammer, chisel, a coil of bent nails, and a roll of jute rope wound neat as a sleeping snake. He looked up at the roof, the corrugated panel bent at the edge. Last night the rain had fallen from it like a chain. He said nothing. He set the hammer on the step, pulled his knife from its sheath, tested the edge with his thumb, wiped it on his trouser leg.
Hat pulled low, the brim cut his eyes in shadow. He climbed the homemade ladder, 2 old rails, 3 rungs. The middle rung had a corner missing. He stepped to the side of it.
He hooked the claw of the hammer under the first nail, pulled. The long shriek of metal on wood sounded as if it drew out a thread of time caught in it. The nail came free, leaving a rust run straight down, like a line of stored blood. The panel lifted at one end, giving a muffled bup into the house, making the dog raise his head before laying it down again. He worked one by one, unhurried. When a nail stuck, he set the chisel under it, struck twice with the hammer.
The nail rose, its shank quivering like a cold tooth. When the last panel came loose from the beam,
he held it in the crook of his arm, turned, slid it down, leaned it by the porch without letting it strike the wall. The rust smell came up, lightly sour, catching on the tongue when breathing. The hole in the roof showed the gray wood beneath, its fibers soft and frayed, like an old man's hair after rain. Behind the stable, beside the collapsed shed, there was another door. The hinges were broken, the door's body lying tilted on a heap of rotted straw. Old pine, its outer face bleached pale, its inner face still holding yellow grain.
Boone walked around, trailing the coil of jute rope in his hand.
He lifted the door, chaffed up.
Stroke even, leaving no splinter proud. He climbed back to the roof, lifted the board into place over the hole, turned it on the diagonal to fit snug against the beams, then drove long nails through. Each hammer stroke was clean, no testing taps. When the wood was green, the tone changed. He shifted position. Some things are learned by ear. The nail heads lay flush with the plank, not buried. The wind changed. The new board clipped the draft. The light through the gap dimmed a little. The axe's shadow lay still on the roof. The hammer's shadow drew short. When he was done, Boone stood a moment. His palm brushed the board's edge, like a hand to the shoulder of a horse just settled under saddle. He slid down the ladder, offered no reason, no explanation to anyone, himself included. The hammer went back to its place on the step, head turned inward. He leaned the bent sheet of tin against the wall, tied it loosely with the jute, leaving the knot's tail a finger joint long. Inside, the stove was still red. The old woman raked the ash to one side, revealing coals like firefish eyes. She didn't look up at the roof. She poured warm water into the enamel cup, tested the steam, set it down. The cup stayed dry on its rim. The water only clouded a ring of vapor which faded. On the bedspread, the boy turned his head toward the door. He woke later than a healthy child would. His face had lost some of its green. His lips were less split. He stepped to the porch, holding the enamel cup in both hands, careful, as if carrying a borrowed thing he didn't want to chip further. He sat on the step, middle finger under the cup's base, forefinger tapping the step's edge. Talk. He waited. Another talk. The dog raised its head, wagged, got up, came near. He held the cup for the dog to sniff, smiling faintly at the corners, then drew it back, not for drinking. He stood, ran a lap around the yard. His footfalls were soft thuds. His shirt's back shivered twice in time with his stride. No cough. He ran a second lap, his left hand still steadying the cup. At the fence, he stopped, tapped the cup against a post. Ting, thin and bright. The dog barked twice, voice light with joy. The boy set the cup on the step, sat in his old place, breathing evenly through his nose. The water in the cup quivered, then lay flat. The change was so small that without the cup as measure, I might not have seen it. The old woman stood in the doorway, watching his finger flick the cup's rim to call the dog. Her eyes eased their pinch. Still empty, but not the empty of abandonment. More the empty of a table cleared for a plain meal. The night before, I'd drifted between the sound of fire shedding remained, half-moon arcs stretching toward the trail. The mud prints were domed like risen dough. One spot bore a deep skid. Earth kicked up to bury half a snapped post. No human tracks, only the mark of horses turning in the dark. I coiled the rope, hung it on the post. No one spoke of it. Boone passed, glanced once, bent to pick up a drop shoe, pocketed it. The old woman opened the door, her eyes passing over the porch without resting on the rope. The dog sniffed the hanging loop, sneezed, returned to the step and lay down, chin to forepaws. Inside, she folded the blanket, not to please a viewer, but to keep the warmth tight, to keep dust from the boy's lungs. She squared it, edge to edge, smoothed it once. The enamel cup lay beside, dry, no bead on the chipped rim. She touched the rim with a fingertip, just to check it was truly dry, then drew back. Her eyes went to the road. No one there. The thornweed after rain stood upright again, drops hanging on their tips. Heavier than dust, lighter than stone, poised where the stem could bear it. She looked through them like someone looking through the dust of time
without seeking anything in particular. Her gaze was empty, not hollow, but empty, as a table cleared. Boone checked the roof in his Boone way. Stand in the house, look a while. Go to the porch, look up. Go back in, walk 12 steps on the diagonal, stop, watch where yesterday's light had fallen, now shifted. No drip from the nail, no water trace on the counter. He put his hand to the beam, touched the fresh patch, tapped twice. The tone was round. He didn't say, "Tight now." He simply went behind the collapsed shed, gathered yesterday's fallen nails, and dropped them into an empty can. The can clattered in his hand. The stove's smoke rose steady, not puffing hard, not faltering. Each time the fire took in a piece of wood, smoke pushed once, then drew back, like someone breathing, right with stitches in their side. I sat on the 3-legged stool, feeling the warmth reach far enough not to need to press close. On the stove's lip, she set a pot of cornmeal. Its wet smell rose slowly, mixing with the scent of freshly cut pine. The dog lay on the porch, listening to the sound in the pot without rising. Lazy, or certain the sound would return, not vanish. On the fence, the saddle straps from the 3 horses of the night before hung in the sun. The leather was darkening again, its surface breaking into small scales like a snake shedding. The wind knocked a strap against the post. Cook, hollow. The boy heard it, turned, lifted the enamel cup. Wind blew against him, breaking a patch of dust into pieces in the sun. The old woman followed for half a second, then looked back at the dry blanket, already folded into a block. The enamel cup was still beside it, dry. Her hand rested on the blanket, fingers over fingers, a moment. Some words, if spoken, only make them lighter in a cheap way. She didn't speak. The block was square, enough to sit on the chair like a brick. Boone changed shirts. Not for new, just for dryer. He hung the wet one from last night on a line pinned with 2 wooden clips. The wind threaded through, the hem shifting lightly. He went to the porch, looked at the sky. The west cloud's edge had drawn back. Light touched the edge of the new roof. The patched board changed color, from yellow to a deeper honey. He pressed the ladder's rail, testing. It still held. He picked up the hammer, dropped it into a cloth bag. Drawstring pulled only halfway, not cinched. A dog bark came from far. Not the one out front, another dog somewhere past the fallow field. One bark, then silence. Then another, longer, like a reminder. The roof smoke rose even, thin, unbroken by wind. The heat above my hair slowed my blink. The transfer deed still lay in the lower counter drawer, its edges dry, printed letters flat. No one mentioned it. The cloth pouch the man had thrown yesterday was still on the table corner, drying, the leak ended, leaving a white salt crust. No one opened it. When I lifted it to wipe away the crust, Boone shook his head, barely. I set it back, turned the mouth toward the wall. The wind carried the smell of new dry earth, horse dung lingering at the fence, and sleeping ash. On the road, no one. Inside, no long talk. The store roof was tight now. Stove smoke rose thin, steady, like the breath of someone past fever. I leaned back, hearing the things that didn't need naming work, as they should. The dog in the yard stretched, blew out once, shifted position. It heard 3 more distant barks, even-timed, unhurried. I didn't count. I let them pass my ears like water through a bent gutter after rain's end. Here, consequences are usually the things done after there's no more arguing to do. Pulling tin, setting boards, hanging rope, folding blankets, setting the cup dry in its place. And the fire, if kept, is kept red until late, not for show, only so this night is not the same as the last. The rain thinned. The wind turned drier, carrying the smell of grass, pushing through soil. The drip stains that had once come through the roof nails were brown now, thin as stitch thread. In the yard, old mud cracked into dust, clung to boot heels, fell shining, not yet rusted. The two new smokes moved differently. One straight, even, like someone cooking cornmeal. One loose, drifting with wind like a fat soup pot hung near a door. No signs posted. No sail boards. No posts lettered. The old nail holes in the porch posts, marks of past signs, were filled with small wood shims. They stayed still. Wind passed without catching on anything. The yard path that once held deep horse tracks was now half covered in grass. New blades, sharp-tipped, holding a few drops of dew not yet burned off, looked at a glance like no one had passed. But under the thin grass, pale gravel still showed. Its edges clicked faintly underfoot. I walked slow. With each step, the grass bent and rose. Some stalks leaned toward the store, as if remembering the wind the rain had carried. Boone was driving another row of nails into the store roof, each hammer stroke clean, with silence between. He set the hammer down, listened, then struck again. The listening wasn't for anyone coming, only for the wood telling him it was enough. Beside him, his hand rested on the beam as on a horse's neck long used to its rider. No words. The wood took it. The roof held. The old woman hung the blanket. The rope stretched between two porch posts. The knot was new, the tail left a finger's length. She folded the blanket the old way, edge on edge, straight. Her thin hand pressed it once, no extra smoothing. On the chair, the white enamel cup was already dry. The chipped rim caught a fine, bright line when the sun passed, like a healed cut that still itched. She lifted it to the breeze, drew in one breath of clay, set it down. The setting was quiet, no sound. The boy ran back and forth. No cough. He held a small stick, drew a square on the dirt by its tip, paused at a corner, thought, drew two diagonals, then scraped it out with his heel. The dog lay under the porch, ears flat, lifting only when the boy tapped the step. That tapping was becoming the house's familiar sound. Not to call anyone, only to check the step still held. On the fence, the saddle straps dried to brittleness, their surface cracked into fine lines like desert on a map. No one oiled them. No need. No one meant to hang anything there again. Two new houses had people. At one, a man with sloped shoulders in coarse cloth walked back and forth with a wooden pail, poured water into a hollowed trough against the wall. The water caught torn pieces of sky, shook with the side wind. At the other, a young woman drove a row of nail hook. There the wood was polished by hands, with a faint ring of something long taken down. She rose on her toes, one hand steadying the frame, the other setting the nail into the same mark. 3 blows, the first light, to stand it, the second deep, the third flattening the head to half into the wood. The sound was neat, waking nothing but a black fly that lifted, turned half a circle, and vanished into the light from the window. She held the enamel cup. Her hand rested on the chipped spot, as if by habit, partly to keep it from cutting her skin, partly to be sure she still held on to one exact, old mark. The mouth of the cup faced outward. She gave it a small shake, letting whatever invisible dust, if there was any, fall away. Then she hung the cup on the new nail. The handle slid over the nail's head, making a faint sound, enamel touching iron, thinner than coins striking, cleaner than stone hitting stone. The cup stayed still. Its shadow fell across the wood, the chip in the rim showing as a small tooth in the shadow. No one said, "Done." She stepped back, not looking for beauty, only to be sure the cup wouldn't fall when the wind came hard. Boone passed by, glanced once, his hand pausing on the hammer's handle for half a beat. The boy ran up, reached for the handle, then pulled back. He didn't ask what for. There was no need to hang a sign that said, "Don't use." Where people hung keys, there now hung a chipped cup. Anyone passing understood, in the way of those who'd once needed water and had none, once been sick without medicine, once had a rainstorm and a roof that didn't keep it out. I stood at the yard's edge. Wind came from the barn's side. It carried the smell of fresh-cut pine, of drying cloth, of old ash. The cup moved slightly. Not much. Just enough for the chipped rim to lift from the wood half an inch, then touch back. A faint ting. After that sound, silence returned, like a loyal dog finding its exact place to lie. Along the path, wildflowers grew among the grass, their stems thin, pale violet, like children's fingers pushing up through a blanket. They weren't watered, no one weeded them. Dust settled on their petals as people passed, dulling the violet. But they stood. At the well's corner, the wooden bucket leaned against a post, the rope wound around its neck, the end tucked into the coil, not dropped. The water below met the sun with one deep glint. No one called it up. From inside the store, the smell of cooked cornmeal drifted onto the porch. The old woman ladled it, poured it into a glazed bowl with fine cracks inside, like a spider's web. Somewhere on the ridge, a man passed carrying a bundle of firewood, not coming in. He looked at the door's nail for a moment, saw the cup, and gave a slight nod to no one in particular. Some nods aren't sent to anyone. They arrive on their own. In this old town, signs that stood in place of words were starting to find where they belonged. The day went on. Sunlight slid back a few finger joints across the windowsill. The cup's shadow stretched, then shrank, moving like the hand of a silent clock. Sparrows argued at the fence, leaving a thin feather caught in the wire. The boy picked it up, blew it away. It didn't fly straight, turned and turned before dropping into thick grass. Everything seemed to be learning how to move slow in steady time. I left the house when the chimney smoke was thinnest. Wind held me across the chest, cool enough. The road out of town was still grassed over, but passable. I placed my feet in the bare spots between grass, the way people used to walk. At the edge, I looked back. No one stood to see me off. No one needed to. On the doorway's board, the chipped enamel cup hung straight. Where people used to hang keys, it held no keys. It held a story already spent. Weeks later, or longer, I came back for no reason. I passed through, didn't go in. 3 threads of smoke still rose. Grass had crept another step into the old road. Fresh wheel marks cut a path around, avoiding the new growth. The store's door was ajar like every day. I passed for the last time. Wind slid down from the ridge, through the doorway, touched the cup's handle. The cup trembled slightly. A small ting brushed the ear, then vanished, like a drop of water touching a flame and disappearing. No one stepped forward to explain why the cup was there. No one said when it had been hung. No one recalled what the rain smelled like that day, or how the water felt down the throat. In this country, some stories need only one object in its right place. The rest is silence. And silence, if you listen long enough, can be a very clear thing. Here, stories often close with something left still. A chipped enamel cup, hung on a doornail, not for drinking, for remembering. Papers can turn brittle, words fade easy. But hands know what to do. Pull a sheet of tin, fit a plank of wood, catch a cup of water, hold a roof together. Healing is sometimes only that. No horns, no victory march. Just chimney smoke thinning in even breaths. I left the town when grass began to take the old path. The cup